Good morning. Thank you. Thank you, choir. That was beautiful. I'm Reverend Michelle Scott Huffman. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a middle-aged, slightly more tan than normal woman with short, mostly gray, spiky hair, wearing a purple shirt and gray pants. And in spite of the fact that some of you haven't seen me for 3 months and others maybe haven't ever seen me, I'm the minister here. For the last 3 months, I've been fortunate to be on sabbatical, and it was wonderful. So thank you. A life of ministry is pretty demanding, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and there's no time clock. You're never off. So it's an act of great care and compassion for a congregation to give their minister a sabbatical every once in a while, where we can truly check out and just be off for a while. And it's not just good for the minister, it's good for the congregation too. There's no slideshow that I'm going to show you, and I'm not going to give you here's what I did on my summer vacation speech. Although many of the details will find their way into messages in the coming weeks, Luna, and months, I'm sure. But I will share that a part of what I needed this summer was just to roam. And I did roam. Some of you have seen the map that I posted on Facebook showing the 11,000 plus straight line miles that made up my summer journey. Who knows how many actual miles there were, but it was a lot. There were 9 flights and 2 Amtrak trains and more Ubers, Lyfts, local transit routes, trolleys, and scooters than I can count, and 1 very expensive moped rental. I spent time in Florida, Colorado, Nevada, Tennessee, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, Indiana, Rhode Island, and Cancun. But some of the most special time that I had was on a solo camping trip in Ohiopyle, Pennsylvania. If you've never been to Ohiopyle or even heard of it, I promise it's worth checking out. This little town sits in the middle of Ohiopyle State Park, where there's camping and whitewater rafting and natural water slides and beautiful waterfalls tucked away down hikeable trails. It sits right on the Great Allegheny Passage, so you can get on your bike and ride to Washington, D.C. if you want. I tried, but I only made it 15 miles, and then I came back. And that was not a good idea, as I hadn't ridden my bike for 2 years. In case that's not enough, though, it's home to the Frank Lloyd Wright designed house, Kentuck Knob. It's 45 minutes from a place called Polymath Park, where 2 of Wright's Usonian houses have been transported and meticulously reconstructed. And best of all, it's 10 minutes from the famous Frank Lloyd Wright designed Kaufman House, also known as Falling Water. Most of you all don't know that I was once an architecture student, and I developed a bit of an obsession with Wright's style of architecture. The Falling Water coffee table book has been a prized possession that I've moved from home to home to home since I was in my early 20s. So it was very exciting for me when our family went several years ago. We accidentally discovered Ohiopyle and took a tour of Falling Water. But that excitement paled in comparison to the excitement that I felt earlier this year when I was mapping out my sabbatical route and realized that the route from a gathering of campus ministry colleagues in Virginia to the UU General Assembly in Pittsburgh went right through Ohiopyle. And I had 5 days in between. I was very excited. Y'all, I love my family dearly. And I love traveling with them, and I know people who have different passions from other people in their family will understand this. My family does not have the appropriate level of appreciation for what they were seeing, or an adequate level of commitment to deep exploration of every inch of the house and grounds at each Frank Lloyd Wright house we visited, particularly Falling Water. So I might have been a little over the top excited about going there alone. I will say that what I'm lifting up today is what I think was the architectural genius of Frank Lloyd Wright and an unusual commitment to connectedness between what is human-made and what is alive around it. Frank Lloyd Wright was a very flawed human in reality. One writer calls him a lusty egomaniac with a God complex, and that seems fairly accurate. Even so, the ways in which we engage with the gifts and failings of those who came before us is complex. So I can't deny the impact that his work has had on me, as much as I would not want to be his friend. So it was on this trip that I got to wander the grounds alone and to marvel at the insight that caused this rather eccentric and quite obstinate little man, and he was little, to design homes that so beautifully joined architecture with nature. Wright has been quoted saying, "Form follows function." That has been misunderstood. Form and function should be one, joined in a spiritual union. One of the ways that Wright created flow between the interior and exterior of a home was to recreate elements of the nature outside, inside the house. Much like you see these beautiful plants at the back window that pulls our eye from the natural elements within to the natural elements without. This has been named as one of his sacred strategies, connecting humanity and divinity with his placement of architecture within the landscape and of landscape within the architecture. Incidentally, for a UU connection, the Wright designed Unitarian Meeting House in Shorewood Hills, Wisconsin is a beautiful example of this. As it turns out, this connection of inner and outer worlds would become a recurring theme of my own reflection throughout my sabbatical and would resurface over and over again. Most obviously in the second to last week of my sabbatical, when I had the honor of being at Pendle Hill, a Quaker retreat center outside of Philadelphia, where I attended a kickoff retreat for the final phase of the Center for Courage and Renewal's Facilitator Preparation Program. It was here that I immersed myself in the work of, as Parker Palmer would say, rejoining soul and role, or working toward living an undivided life. So many of us have an inner life and an outer life, and what is it they used to say, never the twain shall meet? In fact, for some of us, that's how we've survived. By compartmentalizing and segmenting our lives in ways that keep this separate from that, for whatever reason. But it seems that there's something inside us that longs for wholeness, that longs for continuity, that longs for an integrated self that can just be authentic, whether we're in here or out there. That doesn't have to remember that this is how we are in here and this is how we are out there. Palmer teaches about this concept with an exercise that he calls the Mobius strip exercise. And I want to invite you to try this exercise. And because you're excited to see me after not seeing me for a long time, I'm sure that you'll want to participate. So under your chair, if you're in the sanctuary, there's a strip of paper that looks like this, or it might be yellow. If you're at home, maybe you already have, hopefully, but if not, maybe you can grab a strip of paper that's about 1.5 inches wide, just regular length, maybe 11 inches or 14 inches or whatever. There are pens laying around. Kiddos can do this too. All right, so if you can get one of these pieces of paper in your hand, this signifies a Mobius strip. So there's an outside and an inside. And I want to invite you to take a moment to write on one side of the strip, if you can find a pen around you. If it doesn't work for you to write for whatever reason, you can just kind of run your fingers along the strip and think about the things that would go there. If you're a kiddo, you can just draw pictures on there if you'd like. So the thing that goes on one side is your outer life. What are your roles? What are words that describe your roles or your expectations or whatever it is that the outer world expects of you or knows of you? So I want to give you just a minute to kind of think about that. Like I said, even if you're not writing, just kind of feel the paper and think about the outer life and how you would name that.
Is that right answer?
There's no right answer. What is it? How do you present in the outside world? What do people expect of you? What are the roles that you have to fulfill? And once you've got a few things on that side, flip it over to the other side and think about your inner life. Maybe there's a real you that nobody out there even knows. Holton. Okay, if you have a UU pen that's dried out, I'm sorry. Look for another one. So what are the things that are part of your inner life that maybe you don't show people out in the world? Maybe you don't feel safe to show people. Maybe you're just trying to figure it out yourself still, but it's going on inside you. So outer life on one side, inner life on the other side. And you can do this much more deeply at home if you want to get in greater detail. So I want to invite you then to take the strip and just fold it in on itself, like you were making a, what are those things we used to put on Christmas trees, the paper chains or a bracelet. And take your finger and run it along the inside and think about those things that are in there. Take your finger and run it along the outside. And think about the things that are out there. And see how you can never get from inside to outside. You're either in or you're out, right? So then pull off one end and give the paper a half turn. And hold it together. And then run your finger along it. And see how you go from outside to inside to outside to inside. So if you need to see that again, you've got it like this, just a regular cuff, and then you take one end off and just make a half turn. And then you have this continuous thing where you keep going from outside to inside, and you can't not go from outside to inside. So this is called the Mobius strip exercise. Someone who's way smarter than me could tell you what a Mobius strip is. That's not a piece of paper. But I'm not that person. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed that little exercise. So I want you to take a minute to think about your inner and outer lives as you noted on your Mobius strip. And think for a moment about what are the design elements that you might need in your daily life to make that half turn, to help you get to the point where your inner life is speaking to your outer life and your outer life is speaking to your inner life. What are the walls that might need to come down? Where do you need a window instead of a wall? Luna, can you put up that image? So if you look at the picture on the screen, you'll see an image that's common in Wright's prairie-style homes as well as his Usonian homes. This particular image came from a house at a place called Polymath Park. So they've picked up this house from where it was and rebuilt it on this site to preserve it. And you see the way the house is built so that the living room flows out onto the patio. And there's, you can open those doors and there's this open air passage between inner and outer. It was common for clients of Frank Lloyd Wright to say, but I need a bigger dining room. I need more table and chairs. And he would say, you don't need to be inside, just go outside. Here, like I said, he was obstinate. And so this flow that takes our eye from the inside to the outside. And if we were on the outside, the same thing would happen. We would just be able to look right in. And I use that as a metaphor for our inner and outer lives. How can we be intentional? How can we be the architects of our lives in such a way that we can get that kind of flow? Thank you, Luna. You can take the picture down. Parker Palmer writes in his book, A Hidden Wholeness, I pay a steep price when I live a divided life, feeling fraudulent, anxious about being found out, and depressed by the fact that I am denying my own selfhood. The people around me pay a price as well, for now they walk on ground made unstable by my dividedness. How can I affirm another's integrity when I defy my own? A fault line runs down the middle of my life, and whenever it cracks open, divorcing my words and actions from the truth I hold within, things around me get shaky and start to fall apart. Friends, it is so easy for us to find ourselves right in the middle of divided lives. We've been doing the thing that we do for a career or for our education or for the people around us who need us to be a particular way, and we find maybe that we don't even know who we are on the inside anymore. And maybe the spiritual work is to align ourselves in such a way that we can live undivided lives, that we can be fully, authentically, and wholly who we are in the spaces where we're expected to show up. This is, again, what Parker Palmer calls joining soul and role. Because the reality is the world doesn't need us to show up segmented and divided and halfway. The world needs us to show up fully and authentically integrated, knowing who we are, and knowing how to take that into the roles that we're called into in our lives. I will close with these words from Frank Lloyd Wright. We have no longer an outside and an inside as two separate things. Now the outside may come inside and the inside may and does go outside. They are of each other. Form and function thus become one in design and execution, if the nature of materials and method and purpose are all in unison. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. Thank you, friends. Someone posted on Facebook yesterday that this congregation was fortunate to have me, and I think that's not true. I'm fortunate to be here. And I will say what I often say, the best relationships are the ones where both parties think they're the lucky one. So thank you. And stop it. The interlude is a congregational hymn. There is more love somewhere.